Hello and welcome to our first Teacher PD, co-presented by ACME and the Human Rights Arts and Film Festival. My name's Kate Fakay. I'm a screen educator. I work with ACME and I also work with the Human Rights Arts and Film Festival. I'd like to introduce you to our first guest, David Burke, who's from the Human Rights Law Centre and is a senior lawyer there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
At HRAFF, we truly understand the power of story to change hearts and minds and to personalise human rights. That is the key to lasting change, and we feel like that's why human rights are such an important part of the school curriculum. This session's designed to complement the resources that we've designed and put online. The resources include a lesson plan as well as the short films that we've licensed for your use in the classroom. Feel free to use part of the lesson plan or the whole sequence. It's up to you. Let's start at the beginning, David. So I guess I should ask you briefly to tell me what's meant by the term human rights.
Well, we all live in a society and we all interact, and we need rules for how those interactions take place. And the concept of human rights really provides those rules. They're a tool, I guess, for people to exercise their basic freedoms and to make sure that everyone's treated fairly, regardless of things like race, sexuality, nationality, ethnicity, or anything like that. And there's a few really key concepts of what human rights are. The first is that they're universal, so they apply to everybody equally. They're inalienable, which means that they can't be taken away from you. They're something that we all possess in that sense. And they're indivisible, which means that all human rights are important, and a government or a person can't pick and choose which of the human rights they actually want to respect.
In the lesson plan, we've included a great animation developed by the Human Rights Commission called Magna Carta that does talk about the origins, the very early origins of human rights. But can you talk to us a little bit about the Universal Declaration for Human Rights and Australia's role in developing them?
Well, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is one of the most important statements about what human rights actually are. And it's something that came about after World War II, when a group of countries came together to create the United Nations, which was about ensuring peace and ensuring respect for people's rights. And as part of that, they came together to create the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which sets out 30 important human rights that are to be respected, with the aim of ensuring that the atrocities that took place in World War II never happen again. And Australia was actually one of the countries that drafted that document and really took a leading role in the negotiations for all countries to sign on to this declaration of how we all think people should be treated.
So what does that look like in everyday life? How are human rights protected in Australia?
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself isn't a binding legal document or anything like that. It's basically Australia voluntarily signing up to say that it will respect those rights. In practice, human rights are mostly protected by the Australian government and the Australian Parliament passing laws and acting in a way that respects those rights. So, for example, there's the right to seek asylum in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that's in part protected in Australian law because there's laws that have been passed by the government that allow some people to apply for asylum when they arrive here. However, it's an incomplete protection, and we can see that because we know what's happening to asylum seekers and refugees who are, instead of being able to apply for asylum, are sent to Nauru and they're sent to Manus, and their human rights are breached in that way. So one of the real problems that we have with human rights in Australia at the moment is that, unlike some countries, they're not protected every day through a Bill of Rights or something in the Constitution that says exactly what human rights each individual has and what the government can and can't do. And that's something that we really need to work towards as a society.
Okay, so just along the lines of asylum seekers being held offshore in detention, what mechanisms are there to hold the Australian government to account?
Well, there's some mechanisms in international law So individuals can make complaints to the United Nations to say that the Australian government has breached treaties, which are agreements that it has signed up to voluntarily. So the Australian government signs up to a lot of treaties that talk about human rights and its own obligations to respect those rights, but then doesn't necessarily always follow them. So there is an ability to complain directly to the UN. In some instances, you can go to Australian courts, but we are much more limited than other countries where there is an express legal protection of the key human rights as part of the domestic law of that country.
My name is Habib. I'm from Afghanistan. I don't know how I ended up in the Midlands, but I'm glad that I came here. I've spent like years here, building relationships with different people. But if I had to leave, I would lose everything. Again. I lost all my family.
The short animation Dear Habib, which is the animation we've chosen for the younger years, so years 5 to 8, tells the story of a young Afghani boy, Habib, who lost his family and travelled unaccompanied to the UK. And he lives in constant fear of being deported by the time he's 18 from the UK. But he tries to return the kindness of strangers that he experiences all the time in his community by doing his best at school and to help his neighbours. So I guess there's a lot of fear-mongering in our media about asylum seekers or migrants and what harm they might cause to the community. Do you think this is justified?
No, it's definitely not justified, and it's something that's really done deliberately to create division within society. And we've had years and years of people seeking asylum and refugees being used as a political football, and this fear-mongering being used to try to create a sense of fear about them.
In your work at the Human Rights Law Centre, how does Dear Habib speak to the experiences of refugees and migrants living in our community?
I mean, there was a lot in that film that I recognised just in our day-to-day work. I mean, so many of our clients have to leave family behind. They all take a traumatic and dangerous boat journey just to get here, and they all face, at best, years of waiting for their application. And for our clients on Nauru and Manus, no real ability to apply for asylum in Australia. But at the same time, these are people who are just fleeing danger and seeking safety and still treat the world with this kindness, which I think really comes through in that clip as well. So it just shows how ridiculous it is, the political narrative in Australia and the discussion about asylum seekers and refugees is so separate from the reality of who these people are and what we as a community should be doing to welcome them.
My tranquil lands gave no warning, no time to say goodbye. The herd looked at me. Home. It's no longer a place to rest my head. A stampede like the devil's scorn ripped apart my world. I heard them scream to run. They told me to run. I didn't want to leave. And so my journey begins. Walking for 10 hours in the darkest of nights, starlight paved our way into the borders of Ethiopia. I am one of many. Blistered hands and feet remind me I'm still alive. But this is no stopping ground. I hear folk tales of a promised land, of the free, paved in golden opportunity. A safe passage for me is all I seek, access to a world I can rest my head and rise up in one piece. So, into the abyss. Eyes opened, yet blind as a bat. Belly of the beast is not how they described breathe. Oh God, I don't know how to swim. Work it out, hold tight, hold your breath. One down, oh God, it's not my time, hold tight. Her last words echo in my mind, run. In water and sand, just run. I blink, feet running, I blink, feet running, I blink.
So the secondary film, or the film that we've chosen for sort of older years, grade 9 and 10, is called North Star Facing, and again is a 2D animation and portrays the journey of some asylum seekers, and it's quite a terrifying journey that they have to go through country after country, border after border, to finally arrive in the UK and being put through this quite alienating process where they're given numbers and explained quite abstract sort of concepts in a foreign language. What do you think, I guess, for asylum seekers and refugees arriving in Australia, what do you think that we as a community could do to make the process make the process smoother and make them feel more welcome, and to address the fears and misinformation around migration?
Yeah, I think that there's obviously a lot that the government can do to make that process better. But as a community, I think making sure that people are informed and they actually know the truth, and that you're talking to people that you know, and explaining to them the reality of the situation is really important. But there's also a lot of organisations out there that provide direct help to people who come here seeking asylum. And there's organisations that provide food and housing and English classes and work really hard to allow people to become part of the community and feel supported. So I really encourage people to support those organisations, whether it's volunteering or, if you don't have the time to volunteer, donating to support that work. And I think also attending community events is really important. There's more and more occasions now, particularly at a local council community level, where you can really come together with people who've come here seeking asylum and show your support, and also just meet them and start building relationships. And I think that's a really important step for everybody.
As a lawyer, do you think it's important that human rights are taught within the school system?
I think it's vitally important that we're teaching human rights at school, because these are really the guiding principles of our society. Human rights provide us with a pathway to ensuring that everybody is treated fairly, everybody is treated equally, no matter what their race is, no matter what their religion is or their sexuality. And that's really essential. I think we're seeing more and more that the government isn't respecting human rights, and the general respect for the idea of human rights is declining. And it's essential that we make it clear that these are a tool for all of us to be treated the way we want to treat ourselves and the way we want to treat other people as well.
Just on a general note, we have found in our experience that talking about human rights can be confronting for some students, and it may lead to some differing views and strong opinions, and that's okay. We encourage you to support your students to make reasonable arguments and to lead a respectful discussion around human rights. Some teachers choose to let the students know that in advance, and to be explicit about leaving those differences at the door, and leaving those discussions and differences once they leave the classroom. So that's something you might like to consider. From our experience when teaching human rights, we feel like it's important that educators withhold their personal opinions and value judgments. It just creates a freer space for students to be able to explore their views and their ideas. We've recommended a resource called Creating Safe Spaces that's from Positive Negative in the UK. And if you feel like you need some strategies to help you facilitate one of those discussions or a class discussion, we really encourage you to take a look. And finally, I would encourage all teachers to consider making an entry with their students for ScreenIt. ScreenIt is ACME's annual student competition, and it's open every year, and it is for students to create film, animation or game. And this year's theme is Listen. What a great way to apply student understanding of human rights. ACME website has all of the details, so I encourage you to go and take a look. We look forward to seeing your entries. So David, can I please thank you for giving us your time to come in and talk about the origins and the application of human rights in Australia. We've just touched, I guess, on some of the issues. It's a big field, but we really appreciate your time, and hopefully it's given the teachers some further ideas on how to use human rights in the classroom.
Thanks for having me.